Good morning and good afternoon. I am Robin Feldman, Director of Professional Development and Meetings, and I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Self-Regulation and the Underachieving Gifted Learner, with Alicia Welch and Jennifer Roth, co-authors of the NAGC Select ebook. You can chat with us and other attendees at any time, and we will aim to address your questions during the presentation, as well as a designated Q&A period at the end. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's speakers. Alicia Welch is a PhD student in educational psychology at the University of Georgia, and Jennifer Roth just graduated from the program this past December. Alicia is interested in the development of and interventions for attention skills in preschool students. Jennifer's research interests include student motivation and self-regulation. Alicia and Jennifer, the audience is all yours.
Thank you, Robin. My name is Jennifer Roth, and I'll begin the presentation. I am a high school mathematics teacher. I've been teaching for the past 18 years, and I currently teach AP Calculus and at-risk geometry students. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, and she'll introduce the webinar to you.
Good morning and afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Welch. As Robin mentioned, I'm a PhD student at the University of Georgia. I'm also a full-time academic advisor at the University of West Georgia, and I'd like to congratulate Jen on finishing, and I'm well on my way, hopefully, to doing that as well. A little bit about what we're going to speak on today. We are going to mostly investigate the interplay between gifted underachievement, self-regulated learning, motivation, and what we can do to encourage better self-regulated learning skills. We'll start with an overview of underachievement as it pertains to gifted students. We'll then cover the components of self-regulated learning with suggested classroom interventions, and lastly, we'll explore some student case examples. Okay, so what exactly is underachievement? There are many interpretations of gifted underachievement, but all essentially posit that the discrepancy is the discrepancy between potential and performance, or ability and achievement. Now, this is chronic underachievement and not temporary or brief. As usual, and as all of you all know, the difficulty lies in the identification of potential. So not only do we lack a perfect way to identify giftedness or potential, but such chronic or ongoing underachievement is likely to include nominations for gifted identification from teachers or parents in the first place. So further, we don't have a perfect way of assessing performance either. We have many tools, but oftentimes underachievement is simply a matter of you know it when you see it. I'd like to also note that highly gifted students may underachieve and still meet expectations of a gifted student, so their underachievement is often not identified. So how common is gifted underachievement? It's more widespread than commonly thought. It's been claimed that about half of students scoring in the 95th percentile on individual IQ tests did not achieve comparable academic achievement results. Now, as mentioned, the difficulty lies in the identification of giftedness or potential, and when a student underachieves over time, his or her potential is often masked from identification. Okay, there's a problem with the audio. Is the audio better?
Alicia, it is better. I had to mute Jennifer while you were speaking.
Okay, good.
So we're good.
Okay, awesome. Moving on. Some traits of the underachieving gifted student. Now, because gifted students are such a diverse group and their life experiences are equally as diverse, it's impossible to create an exhaustive list of traits. However, there are some characteristics of underachieving students that are related to self-regulation and will be covered in this presentation. Some of those are lower self-efficacy. Some students may not see themselves as gifted. They may have test anxiety, may be unable to set appropriate academic goals. They may have underdeveloped or a lack of study skills. And they may believe that ability is innate and inflexible, and that's an important one. Now, what does underachievement look like, and how does it develop? Many underachievement problems related to self-regulation surface only when students are sufficiently challenged. And for many, this might not happen until their first year of college or high school, the first time they really meet something that they have to actually plan and plan the study strategies for. Now, for some gifted underachievers who don't believe that they can overcome failure through increased effort, this may look like them blaming others for their failure, an avoidance of competition out of fear of failure, feeling of helplessness or of being incapable. Interest in school declines even more, and that could lead to them discontinuing their academic effort. In general, students start with great enthusiasm. Their passion may wane as increased competition and dissatisfaction with their performance or mastery. This could lead to a decreased intrinsic and extrinsic value in school, and ultimately putting forth less effort and maybe even rebelling against teachers. Now, some of the many causes of underachievement. There are many, many causes of underachievement, but for today's purposes, we kind of have three big categories: emotional, regulatory skills, and beliefs about learning. Emotional, lower self-efficacy, test anxiety. Regulatory skills, weaker ability to set appropriate goals, less effective study skills. And beliefs about learning is that ability is innate and inflexible, and that there are maladaptive attributions, and attributions are a large part of this as well. Okay, other causes could include poverty, family problems, issues, excessive absences for a variety of reasons. Now, I'd like to also make it sure to note that instances of twice exceptionality, so high potential students who have a disability that prohibits their performance, are outside the scope of this presentation for sure, but could also be a part of this. So I want to actually pause for just a second to see if there are any questions and to actually make sure that the audio is okay.
Audio seems to be good.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Okay, so we're going to move on to self-regulated learning, if no one has any questions. Is Jen still muted?
Yeah, Jen, you'll need to unmute your microphone.
Sorry about that. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the model that we used is Zimmerman's model of self-regulation and self-regulated learning as our framework into the interplay between gifted underachievement and self-regulation. So you can see the model here on this slide. I'm going to start with forethought because it's just a natural place to start, but you can see that this is a cyclical model. So forethought is where students will make a plan, set some goals, and then that'll feed into performance. And during performance is where they actually implement their plan and maybe implement the different strategies that they've chosen. And then performance feeds into self-reflection, where they reflect on how well they have performed and make some attributions based on this. And then again, self-reflection will feed into forethought. And this model you maybe can see as not simply a group of test-taking strategies. It's or time management skills or study skills. These are definitely metacognitive processes that successful students utilize, and they can be taught to students. This is also not an isolated experience. It relies on modeling, guidance, and feedback, which we'll talk more about that as we go through these slides. And like I said, you probably noticed this is a non-linear relationship. So students go back and forth between the different phases. And as I said, you don't necessarily begin at forethought. You just cycle through these. And it's not just a one-time event. Students continue to move throughout this cyclical model. So like I said, I'm going to begin with forethought and discuss that first. So forethought involves this idea of task analysis where the student is given something to do and they analyze their available resources and decide what they can use to help them. They also assess their ability levels. As Alicia said, they'll determine whether they feel confident about the task at hand and decide whether they think they're going to be able to perform well. And they'll set the goals. They'll set goals and select strategies necessary to achieve the given task. And like she also said, self-motivation is a really important part. This involves goal orientation and valuation, which we will talk more about those goals in a moment. But whether the student values the task is very important. If you guys are probably well aware, if a student doesn't see a task as being important to them, they're much less likely to be motivated to achieve that goal. And of course, students have outcome expectations. They decide whether they think it's going to be a positive outcome, whether they're going to be successful or not. And that will affect their self-motivation. And as I said, the task value. And students, gifted students, they may not know how to effectively plan or set reasonable academic goals, these gifted underachievers, because maybe they haven't experienced challenge in the past, and so they haven't had to go through some of these processes, and they don't really understand how to move forward and set their reasonable academic goals. And this is where teachers and parents can often provide some initial guidance in getting them started. So they can convince them that they need a plan. They can help them organize the necessary steps, show them different strategies to use, help them understand why the task is important or relevant to their future in general, and they can encourage them to offset the negative self-efficacy, so maybe convince them that they are able to meet the goals. So again, students that are in this newly challenging environment may not know how to go through these steps. Another challenge is that if the teacher and the parent are doing all the work and they're trying to motivate the student, they might not be as motivated if they haven't taken full ownership of it. So that's another important part of this. As we're talking about the interventions, we'll focus on that in particular to really get the students to be fully engaged in the process. So we've been talking about goals, and it's really important that students set specific goals, and there's a difference in goals in many ways, and one of those is the difference between mastery orientation versus performance orientation. So when students have a mastery orientation, they're focused on understanding or mastering the material. So that is their specific goal. They want to understand what they're learning. And that's in contrast to the performance orientation, where they are focused on how well they perform. So they may have a goal of making an A instead of I want to understand this particular topic. And this has a lot to do with the students' beliefs about the controllability and stability of intelligence. So students who tend to have this mastery orientation believe that ability can be increased through greater effort and are less likely to compare themselves to others or to their peers. They're also more likely to monitor their progress and their performance and use a greater amount of strategies. Students who tend toward the performance orientation, however, tend to believe that ability is fixed and stable. And so they're seeking the perception of high ability from their peers. They want to avoid the appearance of low ability. So sometimes in an effort to appear capable, they're going to avoid challenging situations. So they'll select easier tasks or a task that allow them the competitive edge. They want to do better than their peers. So now that I've sort of summarized the forethought phase in this self-regulated learning cycle, I want to talk about some interventions that maybe teachers or parents can try to help improve the success of students. So like I said, the type of goal is very important. So you don't want to have a general goal that you just want to make an A at the end of the semester in a class. You want to set some very short-term, specific, and mastery-oriented goals. So you want it to be something that you're going to be doing in the next week or the next day. And you want it to be very specific. So maybe you're going to try this new strategy and maybe just one strategy at a time. And another important part of this phase is you want the students to focus on their self-efficacy. So you want them to actually record this as they record their goal, and you want them to decide if they feel like they're able of performing this particular task or performing or reaching that goal. And you want them to pick things that they actually feel that they are going to be able to, a goal that they're actually going to be able to achieve. And the teacher needs to emphasize the importance of using strategy. So provide a list of strategies to the students, which the next slide we're going to talk about some of those. And emphasize to the students that it's very important to focus in on a particular strategy that may be an area of weakness that they need to make some improvements. And then again, the student needs to record the strategy. So a lot of this is these interventions that we'll discuss are about being very methodical about it, and we're going to have the students recording and this whole progress monitoring, that this is a really important part of reaching those goals. So here's just a list of some possible strategies. This is definitely not an exhaustive list. There's plenty of other strategies that students could use. But they can do things like make an outline, a concept map, or flashcards. They can go to the library or internet, and I know I've had the experience that you think students know how to search for resources on the internet, but they often need help doing that. And I've had that experience with high school students that they really have a hard time putting in the correct word into, say, a Google search. They also need to know how to ask for help. They often don't want to look like they're stupid, so they may not want to ask their teacher or their peers for help. They need to read over their notes and complete practice problems. Sometimes some gifted students early on don't have to complete homework, but then later they start to experience challenge, and then they don't see the purpose of doing their homework. They also need to reduce distractions, set a regular study time and a place. They need to take notes, and again, often students think that they don't need to take notes, and then they don't know how when they begin to experience challenge. And another important part that I think students and teachers and parents forget is this idea of self-reward, and that once you're meeting these goals, that you give yourself a reward at the end. And often students, particularly gifted students, like to really race through their work. They want to be the first person to finish. And this idea of checking over your work and analyzing your errors is also very important. And like I said, this is a very small list, but the particular strategy used might depend on the content area or grade level. You might use different strategies with high school students than you do with elementary school students or middle school students. But again, the most important part is for the student to select a strategy that is going to work the best for them, something that they feel confident that they're going to be able to implement. So again, I think we're going to take a pause and see if anybody has questions before I turn it back over to Alicia to do the next set of slides.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, we'll move on to the next section. Okay. There we go. Okay,
Sorry.
so the next section is okay. The next section of self-regulated learning is the performance phase. Now, this phase is all about obviously the performance of the task, but about monitoring the performance of the task. So there are three main components, and those are self-controlled implementation of the strategies, formative assessments of performance, self-observation, and self-experimentation. And essentially, this phase consists of, like I said, the implementation of strategies identified in the forethought phase, the ongoing monitoring of students and their peers' performance, and the experimenting with hypotheses made about the strategies while engaged in the task. So let's unpack this a little bit. The first part of the performance phase, the self-controlled implementation of strategies, is the purposeful implementation of strategies identified during the forethought phase. And Zimmerman has identified a few salient methods of self-control. These include imagery, self-instruction, attention focusing, and task strategies. And again, this is not an exhaustive list either. Those strategies could be study techniques such as using acronyms or word associations, or environmental controls such as turning the cell phone off, which is a task in and of itself, choosing a quiet study environment with less distraction, or a brightly lit space to help you stay awake or alert. It took me 30 years, but I finally figured out that I need a place with little visual stimulation, a quiet place as well, and I need white noise in order for me to get to a place where I could even think about effectively using strategies such as attention focusing and imagery, which is ironic because my dissertation study is on attention. So the next part is the formative assessments. And so obviously these are assessments that happen during the actual performance of the task. So the ongoing monitoring of performance by way of formative assessments is twofold. First, social comparisons of a student's performance to his or her peers' performance, and also a general awareness of others' reactions to his or her performance, allow for vicarious learning through the modeling of others' successful behaviors. So this is very much the social aspect. This modeling of successful behaviors improves performance through increased motivation, and teachers, as well as peer modeling, can improve both that performance and motivation. Dale Strunk found that comparative information about other students' performance increased motivation, and students who set goals and socially compared outcomes achieved the highest. Secondly, self-observations during the task performance occur when students monitor their own performance for patterns and efficiency. An important feature of this self-observation is the ongoing recognition of strategies implemented and the resulting outcomes. So self-observations and the recording of strategy outcomes enable new hypotheses to be formed. So a good example of that would be when a student notices that listening to music while he reads for class is distracting. He then hypothesized that music without lyrics may be less distracting to him while performing a reading task. This leads to the third component, and that's self-experimentation. Now, these new hypotheses are tested during this phase. So, for example, our previous student, while studying, he had a strategy to listen to music without lyrics now while reading in order to block out noise in the library. But the music seems to be distracting, so he changes to white noise and starts again. So that's kind of what this part of the phase is about, is experimenting with hypotheses that are made during the task. So another one might be a student notices that he's not retaining information as well when he reads on a computer or a tablet versus printed text. I know that's the case for me. And so during the task, he might switch to printed text to see if that helps, if that makes any sense. I'd like to also note that there's a feedback loop here that can occur between the self-observation, crafting new hypotheses, and experimentation. So students can kind of hang out in this zone while they perform the task, going between the observation, forming new hypotheses, experimenting with them, observing again, forming new hypotheses. So it's definitely not a one-track sort of situation. We have some performance interventions for this area as well.
Me before I begin talking about the performance interventions?
Yes.
Okay. So during this time period, students are actually implementing their strategies. Like Alicia said, they're implementing strategies, and they're seeing how that works, and they're experimenting, and then they're deciding if they need to tweak, say, what they're doing. And this may be related to their goals as well. They might need to tweak these little sub-goals that they set for themselves. And so the teacher's role then, or the parent's role, would be to offer opportunities for students to practice their strategies and to also monitor this cycle. So that the important part of this is to offer feedback. So the teacher may give the students class time to discuss with their peers, and the teacher can also be available to offer feedback. So if students are struggling with the implementation of a particular strategy, they're there to help each other. And so they're making these comparisons with each other. They're trying to figure out how to do this better. And then maybe set a new goal, or set a goal that's very much related to the initial goal, or switch up their strategies a little bit to make it so that it works better for them. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Alicia.
All right. So the last component of self-regulated learning is the self-reflection phase. So this is essentially the student's summative judgment of task performance as compared to personal standards and the student's reactions to that judgment. So this reflection takes place after the task has been completed and is comprised of two elements, self-judgment and self-reactions. Now, according to Zimmerman, it is ultimately a person's self-reflection that will inform the student's adaptations of future strategies. So this is a very important area. The first part of that, self-judgment, self-regulating students having set certain personal standards for components of the learning process, they compare their final product of their learning and make the summative judgments on the effectiveness of their chosen strategies and assess whether whether changes need to be made in subsequent attempts. Now, when students evaluate their performance, attributions will be made for the outcome, particularly if it's negative or if it's an outcome that's unexpected. Attributions are very important as they are very much tied to a student's affective state and can have long-lasting effects on motivation and on feelings of self-efficacy. There are three main factors of attributions, internal versus external, stable versus unstable, controllable versus uncontrollable. Now, achieving gifted students, or normally achieving gifted students, tend to attribute their successes to their hard work and high ability, while they attribute their failures to not working hard enough, not completing the work in a correct manner, or the difficulty of the task. Now, comparing that, gifted underachievers may believe that effort is not important, that their failures are due to a lack of intelligence or ability, and that students who must work harder are less intelligent than those to whom the task comes easily. Further, when gifted students feel that success is out of their control, they may become defensive when faced with a failure. They may blame others for their negative outcomes. They may avoid competition out of fear of failure. They may feel helpless, lose interest in school, and discontinue academic effort. So attributions are extraordinarily important, as this is basically the student's emotional judgment of why the outcome happened. So it's a very lasting effect for sure. The last portion of self-regulated learning, and I say last, it's definitely not, like I said, a linear relationship, but self-reactions. These are reactions to the process and outcome of the task. So self-reactions are rewards or punishments that students use to motivate or shape their future behavior. So a few examples of positive and negative self-reactions are above, but they may be as simple as feelings of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And these reactions, even negative ones, if a student believes that he or she can do better, can have quite an effect on motivation and subsequent efforts. So for example, studies have shown that the use of positive or negative self-reactions is actually a significant predictor of academic achievement among high-achieving teenage students, and also a predictor of whether or not they go on to higher education. So once again, I know we have a constant feed going on the chat, but I'd like to stop and see if you guys have any questions about how self-regulated learning and self-regulation interacts with gifted underachievers, or if anyone has anything to add. Okay, we're going to move on. Let's turn it back to Jen for some interventions for self-reflection.
Reflection phase, and so during this time, the teacher or parent needs to offer opportunities for students to compare their outcomes with each other. So this maybe is a time when a student had set a goal and then an assessment took place during that particular class. So maybe students took a quiz, maybe they wrote a paper, whatever the assessment was, maybe a project or whatever. And then the student is now reflecting on how well they performed in meeting their goal. And so it's really important for the student to take a pause and to actually experience this and discuss with the other students. And again, the teacher and the other students offer each other feedback. And it's important for the teacher to emphasize these causal attributions and to really try to get the students to see that based on their new efforts, this goal setting, this strategy implementation, that they need to make that link between the effort and their performance, rather than them linking their success or failures to some innate ability. And like I said, the teachers and students need to provide each other feedback in order to make improvements on the choice of strategy. So maybe the student made some improvements, but they didn't improve as much as they would have liked, and they know that they're still struggling with some material or still having trouble writing their paper or whatever it might be. and maybe they didn't spend enough time reading their book or whatever it is, and so they need to talk about how now they're going to continue to make improvements. And so this is not like an instant fix. It takes time for students to learn how to do these things, and so it's a continuous, ongoing process. And then this is a really good time for teachers or parents to share some really good models. And in the classroom, it's usually an easy thing for the teacher to do. And they can have students even discuss what they did and how that helped them. And when students see these peer models, it really helps in their motivation, and it helps them to see other students struggle and then to, with effort, move forward. As a part of this, we came up with some sort of sample cases, and they're not individual actual students, but they're just a combination of maybe a bunch of different students that we've experienced over the years, or different case studies and research and things like that. But we focused in on 2 different students. Harper is a student that is challenged in her AP Calculus class. She has not experienced this challenge before in mathematics, and she believes that she should make an A on every single test because she's always made an A in every math class in the past. She has this great pressure on her to perform well, so when she begins to struggle in calculus, she feels a lot of anxiety about it. And in the past, she's never had to complete homework in order to do well in her classes. And so she is continuing to not do her homework in AP Calculus, but she hasn't made the connection in that she feels like it's just based on the fact that she maybe just can't do calculus, instead of that there might be some things that are contributing to the fact that she is not performing well. And so what happens then is she just begins to give up. She feels like there's no point in her even trying because nothing that she is going to do is going to make a difference. And so in a moment, I'm going to focus in on both of these cases and talk about some interventions that the teacher or a parent can try to help the student become more successful. And so our other example is Stephen, and he's a 9th grade literature student. And 9th grade is often a transition year for kids where students who have not experienced failure in the past now experience failure for the first time. And so that's the experience that Stephen's having. He's failing 9th grade literature, whereas in the past he's always made A's and B's in his classes. Stephen is very disorganized. He does not complete his assignment. He doesn't take notes. He doesn't pay attention, and he distracts other students. And these behaviors have not really gotten in the way of Stephen making the grades that he wanted in the past. And so when he finds out that he's failing his 9th grade literature class, he's surprised, but he kind of acts like he doesn't care. And again, this often happens with students where they act as if they're unconcerned about their failure, but they really are, but it's just a defense mechanism and they don't really know what to do. So again, I'm going to discuss each one of these cases individually and talk about some possible interventions related to this self-regulated learning cycle. So with Harper, the teacher encouraged her to set a goal of spending 30 minutes on homework per night, because this seemed like the most important area where Harper, it was causing her the most problem in her success in class. And so as we talked about in the throughout the webinar, that it's really this monitoring of progress is so important, and this documentation is really important so that students understand what they're doing and whether that's having the desired effect. And I know when students don't document this, I've actually done this with my students in the past, and when they don't document what they're doing, they actually think that they're meeting their goals when they are not doing that. So this idea of keeping this record is so important. And so she keeps this record of the times that she spends on homework every single night. And then what happens is Harper realizes that she is able to meet her goals some of the time, but not all of the time. So at this point, then it's really important for her to reflect on her performance based on the fact that she's made some improvements in doing her homework, but she still has some work to do. She's not meeting her goal every single day. So that causes her to make some adjustments. She sees improvement, and that then she's making some attributions to the fact that her effort is having a positive effect. And so she decides to set a new goal with the help of her teacher to work on homework at a set time each night at the same place to minimize her distractions. And she also decides to study with a friend. So then, based on those two sort of tweaks to her strategies, she begins to see much more of an impact on her success in calculus. So after that, she feels like this strategy is working, and setting these very specific goals is effective, and so she decides to set a new goal of always taking notes in class. And so again, the teacher plays an important role. The teacher now sees the need for providing some guided notes to the class, and provide opportunities for the students to revise their notes and to make outlines and flashcards to summarize the material from the notes. With all of this, over time, Harper is able to start to feel more confident. So her self-efficacy improves, and she starts to feel like she's able to implement her strategies and meet her goals. And so, of course, now she's experiencing much less anxiety, specifically during tests. And so, again, she has decided that she's going to give herself a reward by going shopping with her friends after she's met her goals. So, like I said, this takes a lot of time. So this is a very small snapshot of this experience with this student, and this is ongoing. So the teacher needs to continue to give the students in the class time and provide the documentation that they need and provide the feedback that's needed to keep them moving in this positive direction. And so the second case study was Stephen, and he, with the help of his teacher and his parents, he sets a goal of reading 30 minutes per day and writing in his reflection journal 15 minutes per day. And the assignment that is given is the students are going to write a paper on a book. And like I said, Stephen was not completing any of his assignments before this point, so he wasn't actually reading the book. So it makes it very difficult for a student to complete a task such as writing a paper on a book if they haven't read the book. So the teacher also offered a choice to the students, which is very helpful in getting them interested in the task. It increases the students' interest and motivation if they get to choose from a reading list. And so Stephen chooses from this reading list, and he has decided he's going to read 30 minutes per day and write in his journal 15 minutes per day. Now, Stephen is going sort of from doing nothing to this, so it was difficult for him to meet this goal. He, again, was given a self-monitoring sheet to record how much time he spent, and it was hard for him, but he was able to, even though he didn't see any benefit to his efforts, he began to see that it was his choices that was keeping him from completing his assignments by recording, by doing this self-monitoring. And so then, with the help of his teacher and his parents, he made a new plan, which involved staying after school. They felt like he needed an extra bit of motivation by having some other people monitor his progress besides him. So he was going to stay after school every day for an additional hour until he got caught up on his reading. After doing this, he began to see the benefits of his efforts. He was able to complete the reading assignment, and he learned that he needed to stop making excuses for himself. And again, the teacher shared some exemplary papers before they began the writing process. So even though it doesn't seem like a huge success for Stephen, he was able to make some great strides in his sort of beliefs about what his role was in his own learning. And so now I think I'm going to give it back over to Alicia.
Okay. So in conclusion, self-regulation plays a role in the academic achievement of gifted students. These processes are also teachable, which is probably the most important point. Self-regulated learning interventions should be planned as a part of the unit and lesson planning, and that it takes time. It's definitely not a one-time fix. So this is something that we hope to instill in our students that they can then work on continuously as they go through. So those are the conclusions. We have a couple of further reading and some resources if you guys want to look into this a little bit more. On the next slide, there we go. Obviously the first one is our publication through NAGC, but there's also some other articles and different publications online that we've found that have been very helpful. So these will give you guys some really great further reading and resources. Does anybody have anything to add? Have you tried any of these interventions? Is this an issue that you see with your students? Or do you have any other questions? I assume that most of the people in the room are either teachers or parents. I should have probably put the Zimmerman article on self-regulated learning in the resources, but it's under references. It's also a resource. It's a great one.
Definitely take advantage of this opportunity to ask Alicia and Jennifer some questions or share your thoughts.
I'd love to hear more from some classroom teachers if you guys are there, or parents. My daughter is 20 months old, so I haven't gotten into this with her, and my teaching experience was a while ago and in a different field. So Jen is our expert teacher.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I've tried these strategies with my students. Are y'all able to hear me again?
Yes.
Okay. I have tried these strategies with my AP Calculus students and my at-risk geometry students, and I wanted to say that it was a very slow process. Always when I start a new strategy with my students, I get really excited, and then I realize, oh yeah, of course it's going to take a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take. But I saw a lot of good things happening in that this idea of monitoring, I think, is the area that I saw the greatest effect, in that students really didn't understand what they were doing. And you know, I teach teenagers, and so they're not always aware of the impact of their actions. And so that was kind of nice to see as they began to monitor what was going on, that they started to see that their actions were having this effect on their performance in class. And they realized that they weren't doing the things that they actually thought they were. They thought that they were doing a much better job than they actually were in the classroom. And so again, it really did take time. And I think that if you have students for a whole year, if you include this as a part of your unit and lesson planning, it's probably going to have a much greater impact because you're going to have a much longer time. And even if you have some opportunities like with some after school programs and things like that, maybe you could implement some of this as a part of that and teach students related to many different content areas so that they can see the effect in several different areas. But again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
My microphone is muted again. We had someone ask if the book, if the publication that we had has a detailed list of self-regulation strategies, and I just said it definitely has some, but you know, it's hard to get an exhaustive list of that, and there are additional case examples in the book as well. But some of those, on the previous slide, some of the resources have different examples or lists rather of strategies, and so I'm trying to think. Let me scan back over and see which one might be the best to suggest. Let's see. I mean, they're all good. Yeah, the Sally Rice and Green, and that was online through UConn's website. That one that had some good strategies for sure. Oh, and then number 6. It's a book, number 6, through Gifted Child. I'm not a book, but it's a publication through Gifted Child Quarterly. That one was pretty fantastic as well. Okay. Vanessa says, my gifted students teacher implements this type of self-regulation. I believe kids do not know how to set goals, and it's imperative that the kids have time to get feedback on their individual goals. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I'm glad that her teacher is doing this. Kids just, by nature, if they don't have to set goals for a while, if education comes easily, and it's just something that's quite passive, they don't know how. It's simply that. And so when they all of a sudden are in a more difficult situation, whether it's going to middle school or going to high school or going to college, they're unprepared. And so teaching these things, and you're right, having time to get feedback on these goals is really, really important. The other thing is that goals are not necessarily, I say, binary, but they have these formidable goals that happen, you know, while the task is going on. But you also have these overarching, you know, goals on top of that. So it's kind of deep. Robin, is the PowerPoint going to be available to download? I think it is, or it stays on the website for a while, right?
The recording will be available almost immediately. I will get the PowerPoint, a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation, and I will send it out to everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Diana, that's right. It is very individualized. Diana just said it's very individualized. What works for her is very different than what works for me, and that's absolutely correct. And something that, you know, in the gifted community and in the education community at large, I mean, we run into that all the time. But you're right. Sometimes it's learning how to say and teach the same thing 1,000 different ways. Oh, hi, Daniel. Yeah, Duke Tip. That's fantastic. I did a little bit of work with them at UGA, at the local one at UGA. Okay, I'm trying to read. Jenny says, Dr. Wright says he finds it critical to address the underlying clinical issues that inhibit self-regulatory processes required for academic achievement. In your sample cases in this presentation, that would include both anxiety and hopelessness from Harper and behavioral disturbance and poor attention from Stephen. And that's right. And he finds metacognitive strategies are most fun and easy to teach, least time demanding on teachers, and most effective long-term for rebuilding natural self-regulatory processes in students. That's great. And he's got his email on there. I agree. I think metacognitive strategies get a bad rap sometimes, but I know that I've incorporated them in my own teaching, and teaching people how to learn is, well, extraordinarily important, right? It's kind of the whole point. Hey, Jen, do you have anything else to add?
I think I'm muted.
Oh, no, I can hear you.
Okay. No, I think that's it.
Okie doke.
Great. Well, thank you both so much.
Yeah, no problem. If anyone would like to get in contact with me, you're more than welcome to do so. It's my email. I'll put it in the chat box here. And if you guys want to further the chat, please feel free to do so. That's my email address. And we can all learn from each other.
That's for sure, and I'm sure everybody on the call today learned a lot from both of you. So thank you again for taking the time to do this.
I hope so. Well, it was fun. Thank you very much.
Okay.